You handle what needs to be handled. You move through the day, respond to what comes toward you, keep things steady. And most people don't see how much that actually takes. But there's this moment, usually small, where you know there's something you want to move forward. A project, a habit, a direction you care about. And instead of starting, you shift to something familiar, something already in motion. It doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels practical. It feels like you'll get to it later. But that tiny moment, the one right before you begin, that's where the entire day is decided. Most people who struggle with time management aren't disorganized. They're already managing a lot. Work, relationships, the errands that keep life running, the messages that need replies. The day is full before the day even begins. You wake up with the general sense of what matters. You may even know the one thing that would move your life forward today. But almost immediately, the day fills with tasks that feel necessary. You respond to what comes toward you. You keep things steady. You hold your responsibilities. And by the time you reach a moment where the next step toward your deeper goals is possible, you're already tired. Or the moment feels too small to make a difference. Or your attention is scattered enough that starting feels heavier than maintaining what's already in motion. This is the pattern of a full life that's moving mostly sideways instead of forward. Someone I worked with described it as, the day happens to me before I participate in it. They weren't overwhelmed. They weren't stuck. They simply didn't have any space left to begin something new, even when they cared deeply about that movement. In this pattern, the emotional state being practiced is one of maintenance. You're training the system to prioritize what preserves stability over what builds momentum. This is the state being reinforced. There's a particular moment in the day where change could happen. It's usually small. Maybe you have 10 minutes before the next meeting. Maybe you're in the kitchen and could prep tomorrow's breakfast. Maybe you just walk back to your desk and the room is quiet for a moment. In that space, there's a quiet recognition. This would be a good time to begin. And then there's a subtle pause. It doesn't feel like resistance. It feels like being practical. You tell yourself you'll start later when you have more time or more energy. You tell yourself it makes sense to handle one more urgent thing first. You tell yourself you'll begin when the timing is better. And that moment passes. Someone I worked with noticed that they would always tidy their workspace before starting anything meaningful. Not because the workspace needed to be clean, but because beginning felt like stepping into something uncertain or opening a part of themselves they hadn't tended to in a while. This pause is not laziness. It's not lack of motivation. It's the nervous system choosing familiarity over change. In that small decision, the emotional state being practiced is avoidance of beginning, even when the desire to move forward is real. This is the state being reinforced. And so when we describe this pattern to ourselves, we often call it a motivation problem. We say we just need to try harder or find inspiration or get discipline. But motivation is not usually the issue here. You're already motivated to keep your life functioning. You're already motivated to meet expectations and support others. You may even be motivated to change something meaningful. What's happening is more subtle. Beginning something new, even something small, requires emotional energy. Not physical energy, not time, emotional energy. The ability to open into the unfamiliar. The ability to step into who you're becoming instead of who you've been. If the nervous system has been trained to conserve energy or maintain stability, beginning feels uncertain. It feels like something that could lead to more demands, more expectations, more vulnerability. Even if logically you know this isn't true, the system reacts first. You may notice this most clearly at the end of the day. The moment you're finally free to choose something for yourself, your system is already in a holding pattern. The capacity isn't there to open into something new. The emotional state being practiced here is conservation. The system is trained to hold rather than to expand. This is the state being reinforced. There's a point in this pattern where something begins to shift. Not by reorganizing your schedule, not by pushing harder, but by noticing the moment before you begin. The moment right before you start anything has its own emotional texture. There's a slight tightening, a slight hesitation, a slight retreat. The key is not to force yourself to push through that moment. The key is to pause and notice what emotional state is active there. Someone I worked with practiced something simple. They chose one tiny action each day that required less than 2 minutes. Sending one message, filling one water bottle, stretching for 30 seconds. They weren't practicing productivity, they were practicing beginning. They were retraining the emotional state associated with the first step. What they noticed over time was that beginning became easier, even when the task was bigger, because their system started to associate beginning with steadiness rather than depletion. The emotional state being trained here is readiness, not perfection. This is the state being reinforced. If this is landing, you're welcome to subscribe. I share new videos each week focused on training a steady, grounded inner state. Let's keep going. When someone says, I need motivation, what they're often actually saying is, I don't trust that I can begin consistently. And that trust comes from identity, not willpower. Identity is shaped by what we practice. If you practice beginning, even in small ways, the system learns that you're someone who can initiate movement. If you practice delaying, the system learns that waiting is safer. You may notice that beginning feels easier in some areas of your life than others. Maybe at work you move quickly, but with your health you hesitate. Or in relationships you're present, but in creativity you stall. This is not because you're inconsistent. It's because the emotional state associated with beginning is different depending on the context. Someone I worked with realized they could begin easily when the outcome affected other people, but when the outcome affected their personal growth, beginning felt vulnerable, not overwhelming, just exposing. Beginning asks us to show up as someone we haven't fully become yet. The emotional state being trained when beginning is avoided is identity maintenance, staying who you've been. This is the state being reinforced. If you're noticing yourself in this, there's nothing wrong. This is simply a pattern that was practiced, and patterns can be retrained. The shift is not in finishing. It's not in doing more. It's not in becoming more disciplined. The shift is in the first 5 seconds of beginning. The moment you recognize an opening, the moment where movement is possible, pause, feel the emotional state present. Not the thoughts, the state, then choose a different one. Not a better one, not a forced one, just a steadier one. Maybe it's neutral, maybe it's grounded, maybe it's simply, I can begin for 1 minute. Someone I worked with described it this way: I stopped trying to complete things. I started practicing starting. Over time, beginning becomes natural. It doesn't require motivation. It becomes part of identity. And when beginning is natural, time management is not about organizing tasks. It's about shaping who you're becoming through practice. The emotional state being trained here is self-directed movement, not pressure. This is the state being reinforced. And so as beginning becomes easier, space opens in your life. Not physical space, emotional space. You start to feel that you have room to shape your day rather than being carried by it. You start to recognize that growth doesn't require massive effort. It requires small, repeated openings where you train the system to move forward instead of sideways. This is not fast, but it is steady, and steadiness is what holds transformation over time. Before we end, take a moment with this. No need to analyze it, just notice what comes up. What emotional state are you practicing most often without realizing it? And if you're ready to train the emotional state that shows up right before you begin, the Inner Foundation Method is the path for that. It's built to help you develop a grounded internal baseline that doesn't waver when life gets full. You'll find the details just below. If you want to stay in the conversation without committing to training yet, you'll see the newsletter sign up there as well. And if day-to-day reminders feel supported, I'm on Instagram at Mike Wang Coaching. There's something meaningful about the moment right before we start. It's where identity shifts, even in tiny ways. We don't have to get it perfect, just notice it. Glad you are here. I'll see you in the next one.